Resentment, realization, and results. This is all about effective delegation and instruction. Have you ever given someone instructions and they've either done the opposite or a totally different thing to the task that you'd ask them to do? How frustrated and annoyed did you feel? Did they misunderstand, or were they really trying to annoy you? Maybe there was something missing from their brain at the time, or yours. Or maybe they're just plain ignorant and incapable of following instructions. Well, very likely none of the above. They'd probably listen to you using their own unique perception and put their own preconceived thoughts and current knowledge and personality in their interpretation of the information that you gave them. They then acted on the information they'd interpreted in their brain. Let me give a simple example of what I mean. One day I was out shopping and had forgotten to put the roast in the oven. I rang my son and asked him if he could do the job for me. I told him the oven temperature required and the time to put it in, and he was good to go. A couple of hours later, when I returned home, I smelt a strange smell, and when I opened the oven, there was the roast in all its glory, with plastic melted all over it. Initially I was furious. How thoughtless was he not to have removed the plastic that I'd used to keep the roast from drying out in the fridge. He had just ruined dinner. When I asked him why he did it, he said, "You said, put the roast in the oven. At no time did you say, take the plastic off." I realized in my anger that I had not. I had, however, expected he would realize to remove the plastic. Let's face it, plastic doesn't taste good, no matter how much salt you use. All kidding aside, I was automatically assuming my 16-year-old son, who had never even really cooked at all, would automatically know what to do. I then realized it was not his fault. He didn't deliberately do this. I had not given him clear instructions or enough information based on his current knowledge of cooking and using the oven. I apologized for being annoyed and explained why I put the plastic on, why it needed to be removed before put in a hot oven, threw the roast away, and ordered takeaway. Lesson learned. I'm Kate Mason, and welcome to Personalities, Parenting and Partners. This is the podcast that connects you to the ones you care about the most. In this episode of Personalities, Parenting and Partners, we'll be talking about the importance of awareness of personality type differences and discussing our perceptions of how others take in information we give them, and ways that we can successfully get our message across without too much conflict and misunderstanding. How many times have you been caught expecting someone will know exactly what to do based on your explanation? After all, those instructions were crystal clear, right? How could I have possibly been misunderstood? Let's take a look at how we can improve these conversations, give people effective, clear communication, and avoid jobs not being done the way we want them done. Let's see if we can help people feel understood and find a happy balance. We have so many different styles of giving and receiving information, it's important to work out the flaws and improve our delivery if we want the job done correctly. In this episode, let's look at the ways our different preferences can negatively affect the information we give and receive. Now, introverts. They might not want to speak up and interfere with the process that's happening, even if it's incorrect. This can create too much stress to deal with the conflict around telling someone what to do or correcting someone. Often introverts don't discuss their thoughts and ideas, and this can lead also to misunderstanding when letting people know what they want. They may also not elaborate enough on the details of the task being delegated and leave the person being spoken to with lack of direction or ideas. Whereas the extrovert frequently speaks without thinking, and their thought process can be jumbled, not considered, and incomplete. Directions they give for tasks might not be connected or smooth. Sometimes they can be so busy talking with no thought or time to check in and see whether the person being instructed understands what's being said. Extroverts move so quickly on to the next point in a discussion that the other person doesn't always have time either to ask a question or think through the information they've been given. Okay, now let's talk about sensing and intuitives. A sensing person can be very detailed in their task description, taking overly long to verbalize the task and bringing in too much information. The intuitive type presents a task or teaching through their big picture of life and might not give enough steps and details, and a lack of clear outcome of what they want from the person they're instructing. I have a very dear intuitive friend who thinks I'm very wise. I love this, I really do, but I know it's not true. She actually uses her feeling intuition frequently when it comes to illness. She doesn't look for logic, facts or details. Her first words to me on the phone are often, "I'm calling you so you can tell me I'm not dying." I use my sensing sensibleness to bring her head out of the clouds and into the present here and now, using logical facts and details that she's missing. Her recent call was an example of this. After several weeks of having a stomach bug she was unable to get rid of, she finally visited a gastroenterologist. She asked if she had cancer, and his offhand answer was, "No, probably not," which didn't help one bit. As an intuitive, she was imagining the very worst and wanted a more definite answer. He went on to say, "We'll look at it in a few weeks, but the likelihood is that you have an infection and irritable bowel, so go easy on the dairy." So she went home and cut milk out of her diet and went on with her life. Initially, she ate a bland diet and was starting to feel better. Then someone expressed concern about her weight loss and said they thought she needed more fats and carbs to put her weight back on. She panicked and without thinking ate food she hadn't eaten for a while. The next day she called me after a very uncomfortable night and asked my opinion. I always love to give my thoughts. I asked what she'd eaten. She listed off ice cream, a smoothie, and yogurt, amongst other things. I said to her, "But your specialist said don't have dairy." She said, "But I'm not having milk." Seriously? I then repeated her dairy-laden list that she'd told me she ate the day before. "Oh," she said, "you are right. I just assumed dairy was milk. I didn't think about it being in all these other things." She's now back on rice, bananas, bread, crackers, and many other suitable foods for an upset stomach, and feeling much better. Her intuitive perception of the doctor's comment was so different from the way he had intended, and different from the way I would have interpreted it. It wasn't until I brought it back to the details that she saw he meant no dairy at all. We're all so different. If the gastroenterologist had given her a more detailed set of instructions of different foods, at least when she'd come down from the clouds, she could have referred to the list and worked it out. If he'd discussed rather than assumed she knew what the term dairy encompassed, she would not have wasted her recovery time. Understanding these personality differences impacts the delivery of information and instructions to others, as well as the unique perspectives that they bring to the table. Thinking and feeling types. When delegating or passing on instructions, feeling types' instinct is to deliver their message as tactfully as possible, putting the other person's feelings at the forefront of the conversation. However, this approach might prevent them from delivering the topic at hand in a clear, effective way, with the message getting lost amongst the cushioning of its information. Their conversation might also lack the logic and facts that the thinking type is looking for. On the other hand, thinking types can unwittingly appear harsh when delegating or sharing information. Their expectation is often that everyone sees the world their way, and their way is the right way. They may not take the time to discuss tasks or information explicitly, and might appear impatient with those who don't understand what they're saying. I witnessed a thinking type tradesman telling a client he wanted him to remove the carcasses in his kitchen so he could install the new cupboards. The client responded in a bemused tone, "How many dead animals do you think I have in my cupboards?" The tradesman looked at him with incredulous disdain. "Really? You don't know what I mean?" "No," replied the client. Condescendingly, the tradie responded, "Well, everyone knows that's a word for inside cupboard frames." Well, no, not everybody knows that fact, and he could have been much more gracious in sharing of his knowledge. Well, no, not everybody knows that fact, and he could have been much more gracious in the sharing of his knowledge. Remember that what might seem simple and easily understood is different for everyone. Be kind when sharing your knowledge about matters that others don't know about. Now let's take a look at judging and perceiving. The impact of clear expectations and organisation is a major difference in the judging and perceiving types of delegation of jobs and delivery of information. The judging type has high expectations that the job will be done in an ordered, structured manner, finished in accordance with a desired time frame. They usually give no choices for a variety of completion or different ways of doing things and find it difficult to explore the problem-solving options if the sequence of events has already been decided. While perceiving types may not put a deadline on jobs and instructions and might not be specific enough in conversation about the process and the outcomes. They can be perceived as having low expectations about the completion and process of the delegated tasks. When perceiving types gather more information, they also change job outcomes and ideas and do not clearly communicate them. In the end, frustrating the person they've given the task to by changing the end goal. Today we're talking to Maree. Maree is an ISFJ. This type is warm and unassuming. They're efficient and responsible, giving careful attention to practical details. ISFJs enjoy helping others and leaving things better than when they found them. Maree's had extensive experience in the corporate world, is an author and a business owner. These experiences have enabled her to maintain an open, flexible approach, staying creative in how she supports people to achieve their business and personal outcomes and to get the best out of themselves and the people around them. Hi Maree, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Kate. It's lovely to be here.
That's wonderful. Now listen, can you just give us a bit of a heads up about your business and how you got into the line of work that you're in?
Well, it is a long story, so I'll give you the short version. I'm an author, I'm an executive coach and a trainer. And I started this way back in 2003 after a corporate career in banking. But I actually started my working life as a nurse in a major trauma hospital. And that was my exposure to people. I loved the people side of the nursing. I wasn't so great at the technical side of it. And then when I moved into corporate banking, it was, again, the people side of it that really, I guess, interested me in retrospect when I look back on that, and then started a coaching business based on that, which quickly morphed into training and facilitating and then writing a few books.
Excellent. So what's your passion that drives you with this business around people? What is it?
The passion is the days I used to walk into my corporate role and you'd literally walk through a big foyer, get in a lift with multiple people and everyone is looking down, everyone was frowning. It's almost like their knuckles are dragging along the ground. And I'd bounce in because there would always be something to look forward to every day. And I couldn't work out why some people, a lot of people just didn't look forward to going to work. And I couldn't get that because we spent so much time at work. I used to get into a lift regularly in the morning with a guy, and every morning he'd say, "Morning, Maree, another day, another $1." And then as we got off the lift, he'd turn back and say, "Less tax." It was like, and so that really started me getting curious about what brings people joy at work. And then that was about how do teams work together, how do people get along, how do they relate, how do they build trust, everything that encapsulates working with other people.
Absolutely. And it's so true. I mean, that is one of my husband's favourite sayings, unfortunately, another day, another $1. But you do want to enjoy your job. You want to go in with passion and excitement and have a good time. But unfortunately, there are a lot of people that don't. And I understand. And I'm sure that you bring great joy to those people who don't in that sense. You know, it's lovely to talk to someone who loves their work.
Well, yes.
So
sometimes some people don't appreciate it.
Sometimes. Now, you also use the MBTI as one of the many personality tools that you work with. So how do you use it in your coaching sessions, and what does that bring for the teams that you work with?
When I work with people one-on-one and also in groups, but particularly when I do my executive coaching, it's around unpacking who they are. And MBTI is one of those great tools that is relatively easy. It's been around for decades. It has so much credibility, and it just opens out people's awareness of who they are and what makes them tick. And then I get them to flip that and then go, well, if you find that you are, an extrovert in an introvert world or whatever, what are the people you're working with? What do they do? So again, it's to help them then become more curious around the people that they're interacting with on a day-to-day basis. So it's just this beautiful unveiling of who they are and who other people are.
Absolutely, and it's so true, because most of us spend the time in our own heads and thinking our own thoughts and what we think about it, and we don't really look into whether other people are thinking differently or feeling differently to us as well, which is huge. So in your work, you spend a lot of time looking at people's values. Now, a lot of people out there don't really understand values unless you've actually done some work around it. What are values in a simple form? And what can the listeners find, where can they find a simple way of working out theirs?
Values, I think, are hard for people to work out. And it's often, though, it's almost like that guide that people are drawn along by to whether they're, aiming true north, if they're really aiming for where they want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I liken it to when people aren't aligned to their values, when they don't feel so great or they're misaligned or things are stressful. And so it's like if someone was at work and one of their values was honesty, and they were basically asked to cover up for something by someone else in the team, then they probably would maybe do that, but they would feel really irky about it because it was going against that value. So there's a whole ream of ways you can find out what your values are, but it's almost like people can usually list off, get a big group of words and can probably pick words that they go, yeah, that really resonates with me, or that really resonates with me, with like honesty or fun or curiosity or learning. VIA Institute, so if anyone just wanted to Google VIA, VIA, which stands for Values in Action, is actually a really, really simple free tool to identify. They list 24 values, and people can go in and fill out a questionnaire, and they can then just work out what are their top 5 values and then go, well, are they playing out in my role?
It is really valuable, because I have done the VIA as well, and finding and understanding what brings you joy and, like you say, a purpose of where you're going in life is really, really important, because a lot of the time they don't align with what we're working and how we're working in different ways. So what inspired you? Like, you've written several books, and your latest one's called Level Up, and I have read it and found it fantastic. As a business owner, I was extremely inspired, and so was my husband, to look at our management system in our businesses and work out where our pitfalls are and where our successes might be. So what inspired you to write the book?
This Level Up is my third book. My first book was The XX Project, which was targeted at women to help them step up, build the confidence to step up. My second book was Connecting Us, which was, again, more team-based, around how do we create a team where we're all connected. And I realised I needed to focus on a lot of my audience is middle managers, and sometimes or often they're new middle managers. So they get promoted into a role from something they've been expert at technically, and they've got to let go of that technical expertise they had and start managing people. And it's like chalk and cheese. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted a book to bring to life everything I do in my workshops and in my coaching, which Level Up does, and provides lots of practical ways to help people understand leading and managing is different to doing, and how they can start to let go of that doing. So it was just a really important, for me, a book builds my credibility, but it's also practical enough and quick enough to read that anyone can pick it up and go, yeah, let's try that out.
Yes, and something that I really got out of your book was the fact, and as I'm talking about on my podcast, that people's perception of what they say and what they do is so mistaken or not always understood by the other person. And the way that we instruct people is often very poor. Like, we think we've given a clear instruction, or we've got our head around it ourselves, but our instructions are not clear and our delegation isn't clear. And it's such a great learning to read that in your book and understand that our perception really rules our lives, and how we have to look at what our perception is around everything. So can you tell us what lack of successful communication does to a business?
Oh gosh, where do you
Just
start?
yeah, that's right. Well, just a little bit. Let's just touch on a little bit of what you think might be the worst element in it.
A woman who's now passed away, who I hold in high esteem, Judith E. Glaser, wrote conversational intelligence, and she quoted something that has resonated with me ever since, and I studied with her for a couple of years, quite a few years ago, where 9 out of 10 conversations miss the mark. And I think, just think about that. Every conversation we have, one of them out of 10 might hit the mark, and that is alarming. But really what it means is they're missing the mark, and they're missing the mark because we have all of this meaning behind the words that we say. And when we're talking, the person we're talking to is adding their own meaning to the words they're hearing. So we have this whole level of misunderstanding, let alone the types people have with Myers-Briggs and how they take information in and make decisions. And so I've been curious around how to improve people's communication because, and I'm terrible. I used to be terrible at delegating because I'd say, can you go and do this without ever explaining exactly what this was, and then be disappointed with the result. Mm-hmm. And so in organisations that don't understand this or have poor communication, there's friction, there's conflict. People leave. There can be a high resignation rate. People become obstinate and don't want to help the people they're working with. There's a whole range of things that start happening if communication is not effective.
There are, and if you're out there listening right now, take a look at your business and think about it. And the 9 out of 10, that is amazing. And I see it every day in my own family and our conversations. So I'm sure that once people start looking and really seeing whether people do understand what they're saying to them, that they'll probably find that they don't. So.
That actually happened to me this morning. My husband and I were walking, and he said something, and I had to keep asking him 3 times what he meant. And he said, but I was spraying the path. I wouldn't have been using water. And I'm like, that wasn't clear.
I know, how simple. And that's such a simple thing. Like, you don't even really think about those things twice, do you? It doesn't normally seem that important, but it is finding out where it's coming from and
what words are missing.
Yes, absolutely. So this kind of communication in business is really, really important. So when you're looking at business, you're also looking at leadership and the importance of leadership and developing that way. How do you see it in your home and environment and fixing poor communication in your home area?
Oh, okay. So you're talking to someone who has a preference for introversion in MBTI, married to someone with a preference for introversion, with 2 sons that have preferences for introversion. And so our communication is sometimes like pulling teeth. And I'm very aware of that I actually have to express what I'm saying, but I also have to be better at asking questions so that I can get them to express what they're feeling or thinking as well, and to build out what they're saying. And certainly in Level Up, the 8 ingredients for clear instructions, which is towards the end of the book, I always have that in the back of my mind going, what am I not communicating here? What haven't I included? What haven't I checked? To really, because for us, for my family, it's about expanding the conversation, because we're at risk of so much misunderstanding because we all have a preference for introversion. I've got to be very conscious to speak out loud at times and actually say what I'm thinking out loud. My husband is shocking at it. We can walk for an hour and we might say 4 or 5 things to each other in that whole walk, because we're walking along thinking, and then he might say something and I totally misinterpret it because he's missed a couple of key words because he's filled them in his head, just assumes that I'm on the same bandwidth as him, and I've got to keep asking questions to say, no, expand that out, tell me more about that, I don't understand. And then he gets a bit cross. So it, happened this morning.
Yes. So thank you for that description, because for an extrovert, we do not get, most of us, how you could walk for an hour seriously and not say very much. That would feel so confining and stressful. And yet when we do walk with an introvert and we are talking, we need to realize how much stress that would actually create, our need to fill in the gaps of the conversation or to have some form of conversation. It's really for people out there to understand the importance that the introvert really doesn't need the chatter and the light talk all the time, and that you're comfortable with it. For us extroverts, feeling like that doesn't make us feel comfortable. But as you've expressed, it's a great feeling of comfortability for both of you.
Yeah. Now, having said that, I can also be walking by myself and be on a phone chatting to someone, and that's like it's absolutely fine. But if you get the two introverts together walking along, we're very comfortable with silence. Very quiet car trips as well.
Oh, that would be boring. So no, that's fabulous. Thank you very much for letting us know that. And the truth of it is that if you are all introverts in a family, do remember that you do need to talk, because a lot of the time, as we were saying before, people automatically assume that sometimes with introverts, they think they've had a conversation, they assume that someone knows it. And then there are the people that automatically assume people understand everything that they say. So overall, in all of this, you need to delegate and give instructions and make sure that the people that you're doing that to or with understand, using their perspectives and everything they bring into a conversation, understand what you say, and you almost need to get them to reflect back what they've said to you. What you've said to them, so that you understand they've got your perspective.
Yeah.
Sounds tricky, doesn't it?
It does. And that's why I give like a checklist in the back of my book, The 8 Ingredients for Clear Instructions, which is just as useful for families as for business, which is to go, have you considered these areas when you're trying to either delegate something or persuade someone to agree with you on something? Yeah.
Absolutely. And as you and I know, this is not easy work. It actually takes a lot of thought process to do, and you can't do it all the time. Nobody gets it right. But if you've got the knowledge and you can input in your life as you go along and think, oh, hey, I could actually use some of this knowledge here, or work with someone in a different way, that's the wonder of personality tools, instruments, and people writing books like you have written. Maree, thank you so much for sharing such wonderful insights into dealing with people, not only in business, but with family as well, and for sharing the knowledge that's in your book. It's an amazing book. It's called Level Up, and if you're in business or even in your personal life, it's a wonderful book to work through to discover how to deal with people effectively.
Thank you.
Now, here are a few tips to take away on effective delegation and instructing all the people in your life. Know your person. Understand their personality and values. Know what is important to them. Don't talk at people. Practice, as discussed in previous podcasts, active listening. Speak their language. Upskill them using effective, appropriate communication. Explain using knowledge of type. Watch out for industry lingo. Ask them what they understand. We can all learn and change, so let's start now. What is your next delegation or instruction for a job going to sound like? I'm Kate Mason. Thank you for listening to Personalities, Parenting and Partners. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could leave a rating and a review. That would help others learn about this podcast. If you have an episode idea, please send a note to thepersonalitycoach@gmail.com. Many thanks to our producers at Podcasts at Pop. Would you do us a favour and recommend this podcast to at least one friend? Thank you, and see you next time.